despair and agony on me, deep, dark depression, excessive misery. If it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Gloom, despair, and agony on me. Thank you very much. Where did that song come from? Does anybody know? Hee-haw! My dad loved that show. He watched it every week. It was back in the 1970s. And, you know, I think about that song, especially when we think about today's first reading from the book of the prophet Habakkuk. Now, we may not know much about the prophet Habakkuk. We may not even know where it's located in the Bible, between Naaman and Zephaniah. We may know about some of the major prophets like Isaiah and Jeremiah and Ezekiel, but not Habakkuk. But even though we may not know anything about the prophet Habakkuk, we can relate to the sentiments of what he says in a very short book of 3 chapters. We can relate to the words that he says because he is unique in all of the other prophets in the Hebrew literature. He is the first to question God and his governance of the world. The whole book is basically a lament. Why, God? Why have you allowed these things to happen to us? He is the first to really complain that very well-known thing that we always say, why do bad things happen to good people? And not only is he crying out to God because of that, but then he's saying, do you not hear me, Lord? Why are you indifferent? Do you not see? Do you not care? These are words that for generations upon generations, people can relate to. How often have been our words of crying out to God because of challenges and difficulties and hardships and pain? All of those things that are a part of human life. How many times have we cried out to God, why are you doing this? Do you not hear me? Do you not care? You see, in the time of Habakkuk, it was believed, this was part of Judeo tradition, that if you were pleasing to God, then God would show favor to you. If you were not pleasing to God, God would punish you. But Habakkuk is questioning this. He's confused. Because he's saying to God, we have been faithful to you. And yet these things are happening. This was about 700, 600 years before Christ. This was during the time of the Babylonian exile. Not only was there gloom and despair and agony, but there was destruction, there was ruin, there was violence. These outside invaders coming in and oppressing them, and they being scattered to the winds. Death surrounded them. And Habakkuk is crying out, why, God? Why? What have we done to deserve this? Are you not there? Do you not see what is happening? Do you not care? See, the irony of this crying out of Habakkuk is that in crying out to God, there's something deep from within that's happening in him. Deep down, he knows that God is there. Otherwise, why would he even bother to cry out? Deep down, he knows that God sees and that God will respond. Maybe not in the way that he would want, but he knows. And this comes from deep within. You know, every day, usually in the evening, I take my walk. And I have my different routes, depending on my time, how much time I have, or how late it is. And these different routes are different lengths. I go by time. And when I'm walking, I often hear the occasional beep of the horn, or somebody with their arm out, "Hey, Father!" And I encourage you to do that. I love to know that you're out there. But you know, when I'm walking, I'm not just walking for the sake of exercise. That's good, and I am doing it for that. But more importantly, when I'm walking, I'm always praying. I pray for you. I pray for the needs of those who have asked for prayer. I pray for my intentions and for those whom I love. I pray the rosary. And this little pouch is my rosary. And whenever I take it out, or when I put it back in, there's something that I see inside of it. And I want to show this to you. Very small. Now, from you, this is probably a blur. It's in the shape of a cross. It's a pin. You can put it on your clothing. And as small as this pin is, there's something even smaller inside of it. A mustard seed. And every time I see that mustard seed, I think of this scripture passage that we hear today from the gospel. Jesus says, if you had faith the size of a mustard seed, you could say to the mulberry tree, be uprooted and go into the sea. Or in Matthew's gospel, you could say to the mountain, go from here to there, and it would go. If we had faith the size of a mustard seed, these things would take place. You know, when Habakkuk was crying out to God, and he was going from deep within, he knew that God was there, and he knew that God would respond. And he knew even at the very end of that book, he says these words, basically. He's speaking about those oppressors who are coming in. I hear them. I hear them coming. My body trembles. My lips quiver. My feet are shaking and are stumbling beneath me. Decay invades my bones, and I await the distress that comes upon us who will be attacked. But these are the last words from Habakkuk. For though the fig tree blossom not, nor fruit be on the vines, though the yield of the olive fail, and the terraces produce no nourishment, though the flocks disappear in the fields, and there be no herd in the stalls, yet will I rejoice in the Lord, who exalts in my saving God. Where did that come from? How could he come to that point when destruction was almost upon him, when all that he had would be destroyed and left to ruin, and yet he could come to that point at the very end and rejoice in the Lord and exalt in my saving God? This did not come from an optimist. This did not come from someone who had a a positive attitude. This was not someone who had Pollyannish mindset. This was a man of gloom. This was a man of agony. No, my friends. The only way he could have said these things was to have faith from within. This came from an act of faith deep down. My friends, we all have our challenges. We all have our difficulties and our hardships and our pains, our sorrows. But we can identify with Habakkuk. And I pray that the Lord will give us the grace today and always, always, to ask for the gift of faith. That despite these things, or even maybe because of them, we may, with Habakkuk, respond in deep and abiding faith. And yet I will rejoice in the Lord and exult in the God who saves me.